I remind you that this meeting is being webcast, therefore please turn off your mobile phones and ensure that you speak clearly into your microphones. You've all logged in, I presume? Thank you. Can I remind all members to sign the attendance register and confirm any apologies have been received for this meeting? Have we got any apologies, please?
Councillor Gaynor James asked me to hand in their apologies, Chair.
So I got apologies from Councillors Glyn Carron, Giles Davis, Cathy Evans, Elizabeth Haynes, Gwyn Jenkins, Mike Jeremiah, Sue Walson, Chris Tew and Colette Thomas.
Anybody else? Before I go on to the next item on the agenda? No. Thank you very much indeed. Next item on the agenda, over to our friend over here on the declarations of interest. I suspect I know what the answer is going to be.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not aware of any interest the members need to declare in relation to the items on the agenda. Thank you.
As usual, we say to you, you're welcome to stay, but I suspect you haven't gone to it.
I can stay for these two items. So.
Thank you. You shocked me today. Thank you very much indeed. Before we go on to the meat of the matter, we obviously have got officers along here. I'd like them to just introduce themselves. We do that normally? Yeah. If you'd like to introduce yourselves so we know who you are, rather than just sitting there anonymously. If you could start there with Jason.
Jason Lewis, I'm the Head of Strategic HR.
Nigel Aurelius, Assistant Chief Executive.
Lynn Williams, Head of Business Support.
Steve Jeans, SRS.
Mike Doverman, Assistant Director from the SRS.
Other thing is, if you look down your agenda, you see item number 6, which is update report progress against adopted action plans. What we're going to do is make item number 6 number 5 and item number 5 number 6, because obviously we don't want officers to sit around here any longer than they can when they. So we'll keep that all as a block. That should have been that way round. Thank you very much indeed on that one. So item number 3, which is confirmation of minutes of the 31st of the 1st. So what we do first of all is check those for accuracy and attendance, etc. So we're on page number 3 on your agenda, page number 4, page number 5, page number 6, and page number 7, page number 8, page number 9, and page number 10, page number 11, page number 12. I think that's it, isn't it? Somebody like to move in a second, please? Right. Then we'll go back to that lot and say any matters arising on any of those pages. I take by your silence there isn't. So move those from that point of view. Thank you there. Right. Minutes of the go on to agenda item 4, which is the minutes of the 1st to the 2nd, 2018, which is the other overall, the last meeting we had. And we'll go through page 13, 14, 15, 16 and 17. Any problems there at all? I show you a deafening silence. There isn't, thankfully. And so we'd like to move in a second, please. Thank you, Peter. And Steve, I can see. Right, any points anyone wants to raise at all? No? Great. So we move in a second those now. Obviously done that anyway. So thank you very much indeed. Item number, where are we now? We've gone through that so fast. It's item number 6 on the agenda, which update progress against adopted action plans. We'll go over to Tom on that to lead. You take me apart on this one. Thank you.
Right, good afternoon, members. I appreciate for a lot of you, you wouldn't have sat through one of these in particular meetings before. Basically, every time we receive an external audit report from one of our appointed external auditors, that report is received by the audit committee, and the recommendations from that report are then pushed out into the appropriate scrutiny committee for monitoring. So what you have got today is a compendium of all the active reports that we are currently monitoring as a committee, and these will come back to you on an annual basis for as long as you feel necessary. So as you can see, there's 8 different reports, and for each report, the relevant responsible officers are here today to answer questions. As you can see, there's a brief update for June 2018 for each of the recommendations. And any questions you have can be then put to the relevant officers. If you feel in the course of your questioning that recommendations have been fully implemented, I think it's important that you say so, because we don't want to keep bringing back these reports year on year when, you know, really speaking, the recommendation has been undertaken. So if you feel the recommendation's been done, then we'll whip it off for future monitoring. However, if you've got any recommendations you wish to make, then these can go to officers, but they will also go back to the audit committee. So you're in effect telling them that, you know, you're not satisfied in a certain area. I think that's pretty much all I need to say on the report. And what I suggest is you just take it. You know, there's 8 reports, so you just take them one by one. There's Jason's here to answer the first 2, which are HR related. We've got 2 officers from the SRS who can answer to the report on the SRS, and then the remainder then of the questions on the financial papers can go to Nigel, and Lynn may have something to say as well. And that's it for me.
Okay, would you like to go on to it's Appendix 1 for review of whistleblowing Welsh Audit Office? And Jason will kick off on that, would Jason?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can you hear me? I'm not particularly close to the microphone. Just a bit of background really about whistleblowing. I'm sure you'll all be aware what whistleblowing means, but it's basically the process by which somebody, either internally or externally, can raise a complaint on any aspect of the council's work if they feel concerned about it, and makes a commitment they can do that without fear of any backlash or any detriment as a result of raising that complaint. As a bit of context, these series of recommendations came about as a result of a national review carried out by the Wales Audit Office into all local authorities in Wales, and I think it extended into other public service bodies as well. And all these recommendations were common across all 22 authorities in Wales. This is a bit of a historic issue. It came about, the review came about following some concerns about some high-profile complaints that were made to certain authorities in Wales, Torfaen not being one of them, I hasten to add. And these recommendations came about as a result of that. My feeling, I said generally about this matter, is that it's no longer something that I have a concern about. I think we have an established policy. It's very, very clear about how people would go about raising such a complaint. It follows model guidance that was provided by the Wales Audit Office at the time. And it has been published and it's been promoted, certainly internally, fairly extensively since its introduction some years ago. So from my perspective, I think that the issues that existed at the time have now gone away. We have an established policy. It is monitored as part of our employment policy monitoring process. So it's picked up through that process. And I guess we haven't had any yet, any whistleblowing cases to test it against. It's been reported the last couple of years. I've been here for a year. I certainly haven't had any whistleblowing complaints raised whilst I've been here. There weren't any the previous year. there is an error in the report in terms of the updates that are provided here for this year. Delis did kindly take a report to Ethics and Standards Committee last year, pointing out that we hadn't had any whistleblowing complaints and the policy remained as it was. And from my perspective, the whistleblowing policy remains fit for purpose. So that's I guess the general gist of it. You will note a couple of the updates are suggesting that it is no longer monitored. I guess the only one that doesn't suggest that is the first one, and it's about making staff aware of the arrangements. Now, we have regular HR bulletins that are distributed to staff in electronic and paper form. So it features within those bulletins the fact that there is a whistleblowing policy and where to access it. There was a mention in the update in February 2016 that the awareness could be tested through the staff survey. That wasn't obviously a recommendation that I'd made. I don't actually believe that's what a staff survey is for, to be honest with you. But nevertheless, that remains an outstanding recommendation. But I would recommend to this committee that I'm comfortable with the arrangements we're in place. I don't personally feel that we need to continue to monitor this on an active basis through this committee.
Am I seeing questions here? Right, Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that information, Jason. A couple of things. You mentioned that the survey is to be continued in June 2018. Has that started? That's the first question. Leading on to that, how successful has the survey been in the uptake by persons? And the other one is, could you give us a bit of information about the survey group? Who makes that group? Who makes up that group?
Thank you, Councillor Evans. The survey it's not directly associated with the whistleblowing set of recommendations yet, obviously, but I'm happy to tell you a bit more about the survey. The survey is closed. We had 928 responses, which was 300 up on last year. So, which accounts for something like 49% of the non-schools-based workforce, which is very pleasing, and it gives us a very good representative sample of what staff are feeling, from my perspective and from a professional statistical perspective as well. What we've done, what we did last year into the early part of this year, mindful that some of the recommendations that were coming out of the staff surveys in previous years, the view of staff was that we weren't really proactive about responding to some of the concerns that were being raised. So we felt that it would be useful if we established a bit of a focus group that represented as many services as possible across the council. So that team's been in place. That team has been in place for a few months now. They were instrumental in encouraging a greater participation. We used the ballot boxes that weren't being used at the time, and they were acting as champions throughout the organisation, trying to encourage participation. I think that's been really, really successful. The challenge now is for them to, and they're actively doing this, is analysing the results. It closed a couple of weeks back, the survey. So they're analysing the results at the moment and establishing what that's telling us, what are the areas of concerns, so that they can then look to start working on some of those and start developing some recommendations for improvement. But they pretty much cover the whole of the organisation, so we've got representation across the whole of the organisation, other than schools. And of course, schools are their own sovereign bodies, so at this stage, whilst it would be good to understand the feelings of staff based in schools, that really is the responsibility for the individual governing bodies.
Thank you, Jason. Can I just come back briefly, Chair? So the survey group it mentions in the report as well will be looking at the alternative surveying methods as well.
Sorry.
Just a quick comment on that. The group are also looking at alternative methods, looking to see whether the way that we're approaching it at the moment is the best way, whether an annual survey is the best way, or we carry it out on a more regular basis, perhaps in shorter and sharper chunks with different surveys on different aspects of employment. But that's part of the work of the group. So they'll come up with some recommendations on that.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Chair.
Ron?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Jason. When this has all been collated, I would like to see what is the outcome of it all and see where what we should be looking at. Because as councillors, we all get different things going on and different bullying cultures or whatever. So it would be nice to see what, as councillors, these things we hear, and if they're coming up within this survey, and so we can all see it and what we should be looking at.
Yeah, we naturally share that information quite widely anyway. It is a matter for the Chief Executive as Head of Paid Service, but in terms of information, absolutely that there isn't an issue about providing that information, so you've got an awareness of perhaps some of the issues.
Any more questions? Jess?
Yeah, so, sorry. You said you don't want the whistleblowing to go on the survey. So are you relying on managers then to check staff awareness? And you said earlier you're happy with that arrangement. You still fine with that, and you think there's no problems going forward?
I don't think it's the same as all in terms of all employment policies, whether it's a sickness absence management policy or a disciplinary policy or whatever it may be. We'd expect managers, as a core part of their responsibilities, to make sure that their staff are aware of the policies and procedures that their employment are governed by.
Any more? Awesome, very quiet to start with. Can I ask, with suggestion of the policies, you're suggesting that we're going to you're going to test, and in terms of recommendations for this committee, is that's ongoing, all that? A horrible expression, but I can't think of a better one. In terms of how you test your policy, surveys is one of them, obviously, and then how robust your policies are, that they're actually working. That's what we're talking about, isn't it?
They get reviewed as part of the they get tested as part of the review process. So we do involve staff in providing us with some feedback on how a particular policy is performing, what particular issues there exist when we carry out the review. So it's part of the normal review process. I guess that's what I'm saying.
You do that annually, do you?
It depends which policy it is. They've got variable review dates on them. Some of them, the less contentious ones, are reviewed less often. Some of the more contentious ones that perhaps are more subject to changes in legislation are reviewed on a more regular basis. Some of them every 12 months, yes.
Thank you, Jason. But anybody else on this? Would you like us to, now we've sort of aired this one, would you like to move on? So we'll go to the next item on the agenda, which is it's a mouthful, this Auditor General's report on managing early departures across Welsh Public Bodies National Study. That's Jason again, isn't it? Yep. Okay.
In a similar vein, this was as a result of, again, another national survey by Wales Audit Office. And it again came about around concerns about earlier part of the decade, really, to be honest, around 2012, 2013. A number of authorities were running what they call voluntary severance schemes, so large-scale redundancy programmes, not necessarily driven by any demands in organisational change. So we were talking about staff leaving some of the larger authorities in their hundreds. And the Wales Audit Office at the time were concerned about the decision-making processes around some of those releases, both in terms of financial perspective as well as a loss of skills perspective. So these recommendations came out as a result of that. Again, this is a historic position. We don't run these large-scale schemes anymore, and the language used by Wales Audit Office in that review, such as early departure schemes, is not recognised generally. It's their own terminology. but it does refer to large-scale voluntary redundancy schemes. We don't do that anymore. Any redundancies are normally associated with changes made within individual services, and they're always subject to the approval of a business case. So, from my perspective, this particular subject is no longer, I don't believe, no longer a matter that is needed an ongoing review, to be honest.
Nigel?
Just to add to that, I mean, this report is about early departures across all public bodies. It's not just about local government, and there were some quite significant ones in other public bodies, you know, so there was some concern. And in this council, where we've done voluntary redundancy, which is what we would call it was as a desire to avoid compulsory redundancies arising out of budgetary decisions. So I think those are important points.
Peter?
Just a small point for information. I'm just interested. There's a sentence here that says there will be no departures which required reporting to council because of triggering the 100k threshold. Is that the reporting this has to be done to the independent remuneration panel? Thank you.
Did I see some other hands up here?
Sorry, just to confirm, and the council. So it's a report to the independent remuneration panel and the council.
I see some other hands up here. Or you're all content at the moment? So, is it true in saying this is we've gone beyond this now in terms of what we do as a council?
That's my view.
Yeah.
Yes.
Members content? Sorry, Stuart.
The comment, Chair, that the internal audit don't currently having this as a key risk, so that is pleasing at this time.
So, in terms of any recommendation, this is off our current work strategy, is what you're saying, Jason?
That's what I suggested.
Yeah, thank you. Right, so we move on to the next item on. Pardon me, I'll just flip over again to a bit of paper that I can look at. It's next one, which is the third one down, review of the shared resource service. And we've got two gentlemen here from, if you'd like to reintroduce yourself again, because we haven't got the usual person here, and what your role is, please. And then if you'd like to introduce it, this particular item, if you would, please.
Thank you. My name is Steve Jeans. I'm an Assistant Director in the SRS and have responsibility for applications and procurement.
My name is Mike Doverman. I'm also an Assistant Director at the SRS. My portfolio is internal performance or anything like SLA management.
The review is born out of an audit that took place in 2015, and the first point around developing a strategy. We've now completed that. That was actually done in 2015 and signed off. As a result, we've developed the One Wales platform, which is a collaborative platform for hosting council services. So we've recently put Monmouthshire County Council's email into the One Wales platform, and in the second quarter of 2018 we're hoping to put Torvine's email into that platform. And additionally, it's a platform where we can consolidate on infrastructure across the partner organisations of the SRS. So we are looking at hosting HR and payroll in One Wales, and through that consolidation we will be able to reduce the amount of hardware required, because we will be sharing common platform and common standards. So it means that we'll be able to provide higher levels of service and higher levels of resilience to all our partners. Any questions?
Yes, Steve.
As members with the SRS, we seem to be experiencing a lot of problems with our computers and the networks, and they seem to be done quite regular. Is there any particular reason why, you know, with this shared network?
This is the member's question. It always comes up at these meetings. Is that relevant to this? I'm not sure, but it's one that members always bring up.
From a point of view of managing our applications and managing our internal infrastructure, we have got some regular maintenance that we do, regular windows of opportunity to do that maintenance. So certainly from a point of view of taking in comments and feeding back where there is issues. I know certainly you had a rollout or a recent rollout of Surface tablets and kit. So from the instance you're talking about, have you got any specific elements that we could look at? Because what usually comes back from our performance reviews, which happen monthly, are some of those points which potentially where systems have been impacted or there's been outages. There is a reporting mechanism we go through to try and feed that information back, such as the lessons learned when there is an incident. And again, we're happy to share those. But certainly, we do monitor the uptime of all our applications or some of our applications on our network infrastructure.
But looking at the emails I just received again, the SRS was down because of a firewall again, which then puts it difficult for us to use our system to operate. You know, if we need to contact you or use a system, we have great difficulty.
I think in response to that, we are as an organisation, Torfaen has to meet the accreditation standards of the public sector network, and we are audited and for all our partners on a number of network configurations and settings, and there's a huge piece of work underway to make sure that we are implementing all the recommendations from the PSN accreditation. Now what that means is if we fail the PSN accreditation, we'll actually be disconnected from the wider local government network. So it's important that we have the opportunity to implement changes, and they will result in planned downtime to actually implement configuration changes and get our network up to spec to meet the audits that happen on an annual basis.
So does that mean to us as members that the service is going to be improved for us to use?
Yes, we are working towards improving the service.
Right. Steve, I've got Peter coming in.
Just interested, can you tell us a little bit about this memorandum of understanding with South Wales Police and Gwent Police, and do we have any arrangements with the RSLs at all on this?
So the Memorandum of Understanding was originally between the two local authorities, Torfaen and Monmouthshire, and Gwent Police when the SRS first formed or came together. Since that time, Blaenau Gwent has come into the partnership, and also Newport City Council. And the Memorandum of Understanding is being rewritten and amended to take into account those additional partners. I'm not aware that there's a Memorandum of Understanding with South Wales Police. It's with Gwent Police and the 4 local authorities.
It says on this, the joint legal services for South Wales Police and Gwent Police. That's
okay.
I can probably answer that. The Memorandum of Understanding is the document that governs effectively the shared resource service. The reference to the joint legal services South Wales Police, the lead authority on the legals at the moment for the shared resource service is Gwent Police, but they operate in a shared service with South Wales Police. So the Memorandum of Understanding is being revised by the shared legal service, but it's the partners that Steve said that are in it, and there's no involvement from RSLs.
Thanks, Nigel. Janet?
Thanks, Chair. Just a question. Has SRS completed its research with a view to demonstrating that the service provided is value for money?
Yes, so we took a benchmarking exercise in 2016 and 17. I think I believe the results of that have been updated into the actions. We've also developed a service level agreement now with our partners. That's currently being communicated to our partner organisations, and in that document it will specify the actual costs of the service, and that will demonstrate the value for money.
Thank you.
Just to add to that, we've also got a monthly performance meeting that I mentioned earlier, and that is to look at the KPIs, so our agreed service levels, and that's across projects, across any upgrades to keep the lights on, for want of a better, and also to make sure that our day-to-day performance of answering calls and making sure that we're closing the right amount of problems that come in are monitored and kept really at the forum on a monthly basis.
Okay.
Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Chair. Peter's asked the questions I wanted information about with the memorandum of understanding. But I just wondered if, and Nigel as well has explained part as well, I was just wondering if there could be any implications for us going forward when it is rewritten.
No, I'm not aware of any implications going forward. The memorandum is being amended to take into account Blaenau Gwent and Newport City Council joining the SRS partnership. I do believe that the original memorandum will need to be written in the future, as the existing one will come to an end, but that's still a few years away.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Chair.
Any more questions? Thank you very much for coming. We've had you here a few times. Is there any more you'd like to add? Because obviously it's an improving service. It's something that we've, we probably will have another one on, because you're trying to add value to this service all the time. And I mean, we always get the question about members' kits. It's a point that comes up, and I think we've all got a view on that one. I just wondered, I'd like to conclude. Yeah.
Just to respond to the Council again, we do have regular contact. Certainly, we're always looking to improve our communication where we can, both internally and across, obviously, the members. So if there's any elements that need to be raised or you feel need to be readdressed, absolutely happy to come back and do that. And certainly we're dealing with outages. There is always a reflection exercise which goes on within the SRS to try and always forward think and prevent any outages. So certainly we are open to any information that comes back around service outages and preventing those going forward.
The other thing I've been asked to ask is, are you going to keep this one ongoing, or do you want to take it off?
We'd like to take it off, please.
You sounded rather
pleased.
You feel that you've reached a point where you could do that?
Yeah,
it's up to members, obviously, but
yeah.
Could you give us an explanation where you think you could do that?
The strategy is now embedded, and we're taking that forward through to implementation with the One Wales platform and the strategic board meetings around consolidation of the hardware and collaboration at the technical level. The memorandum is being updated. But, that's just to include the 2 additional authorities that have come in. The delivery groups we have in place, so every month we meet with the partners at a senior officer level to prioritise workloads and deal with any potential performance issues. So, we believe that we have now implemented most of the WA audit report recommendations.
Peter?
It seems sensible for me for you to take it off, but I would suggest perhaps that when you've said in a few years' time this is going to be rewritten, perhaps then we could be consulted afresh.
It's obviously something that we as the scrutiny can look at, but there could also be on our part that maybe SRS, if we don't scrutinise them, we look at them as something that's a regular thing that comes to seminar. There are other options they could look at. I wonder whether you have an ongoing scrutiny, because you're obviously outside, in one respect, you're outside the system in one way, and you obviously got people like Nigel that sit on your board, whether you have an ongoing scrutiny system that you have as well internally. I don't know how it works with you in that sense, other than that we scrutinise you.
Yeah.
Thank you. We do have the strategic board that sets the direction, and that is made up of the leader of the council from each partner organisation and the PCC, as well as the senior officer, which is the chief executive. So that's the makeup of the strategic board, which then handles the governance of the SRS.
Do you want to come back on that?
I was just thinking, Chair, if you wanted to make a recommendation, I mean, at the end of the day, this is a collaborative service. You've got another report on the agenda, which is a similar collaborative service, asking about joint scrutiny. You may want to consider whether, as a scrutiny committee, you make a recommendation that actually there ought to be some form of joint scrutiny where all the partners get together. It would probably be helpful to the SRS because they wouldn't come 4 or 5 times, but it would give you, as a scrutiny committee, an in into scrutinising the performance of the SRS.
It would be something incredibly similar to what we do in PSB, wouldn't it, really? Nigel, you would be happy with that, I suspect. Yeah, thank you for that. That's very useful. Members content to go on to the next item? Thank you. Item, whatever it is on here now, the fourth item on the agenda, which is financial position statement 2014-15 Welsh Audit Office, and that's over to Nigel. I've got you down there on that one.
Chair, if I may, I mean, I'm not going to go through these page by page. These all trip over themselves if members have read them. There are several national studies, a Torvine study, all on sequential years. Lots of similar recommendations because they were coming back in, very soon afterwards. I hope you will see from the narrative that the vast majority of things on there we do, have done, or are concluding. Medium-term financial plan, savings plans, etc., etc. The only one that's outstanding is the one on income, which you may want to keep on your work programme, but the others, I would say, are all concluded. But happy to answer any questions.
Okay, we've got a very succinct answer there. We'd like some succinct questions, please. Anybody like to kick off? Peter, I'm waiting.
I agree with Nigel that we ought to keep income generation on the agenda, because I can remember the scrutiny last year, and as one of the reports reflects, as a result of councillors' concerns, there were some minor changes. So that's certainly an area, as councillors, we would wish to keep an eye on. Otherwise, I agree with what you've suggested, Nigel.
Right. So, how would you like to deal with this? Next question, folks. Norma?
Accept what Nigel has suggested.
Thank you very much. So that seems to be it now. Unless you want to ask the staff we've got here any more questions. Right. Thank you very much indeed. Right. Thank you. That seems to be it now.
Sorry. Nigel, you're free to
go.
Free to leave. Sorry, you staying? Okay.
Okay. I think what we're
just do the recommendation.
Well, that's what I was going to say. To be like go through this point by point and look at recommendations. All right?
Sorry.
Yeah. Tom's got them.
So based on what we've just said, I think the only recommendation that you are looking at is for us to do a little bit of exploratory work to see if there's any appetite across all the other authorities and the police who are involved in the SRS to see whether there's any appetite for a joint scrutiny. And then there's a couple of comments then around wanting to take off the majority of the monitoring, but still keeping on the recommendations related to income generation. I think from my point of view that sums it up. I don't know if anyone else has got any comments.
Any more comments? All right. That sums it up nicely and let him get on with it. Thank you very much for that on that way. So if that is it, we'll come back with a recommendation. You're all looking stunned actually because you're going to lose very quickly. And Dave, you right, Dave? Thank you. No, thank you very much. So, everybody okay now? Anyone want to take a break before we go on to the next item? Oh, no, all right. I believe until the... So we now go on to the next item on the agenda, which is the city deal part. And let me compose myself on that a minute, because I've stunned now quite quickly reading through that one. Who's there? Do you want to go? Yeah. Okay, I'll let Tom.
Thank you, members. As members will be aware, the 10 authorities that can make up the Cardiff Region City Deal agreed to form that City Deal approximately a year ago. Now, a meeting of their cabinets in November 2017, it was agreed that a joint scrutiny committee should be formed. But in order to do that, we need to go. Each authority needs to go through the process of agreeing that they want to be part of that scrutiny committee, and that goes to scrutiny and then to council. But we also agreed as officers that the draft terms of reference would be discussed by each scrutiny committee, and any comments would then be fed back into the scrutiny committee once that scrutiny committee had been formed, providing you agreed to the first part. So there's not a lot more for me to say about this. Obviously, it's an incredibly big project. We're talking billions and billions of pounds. So effective governance seems to make sense, and a scrutiny committee to oversee that, to take reports and recommendations and give recommendations back to the City Deal cabinet makes a lot of sense. So I think it would be good if we just did it in two phases. Are members happy that we are part of this City Deal with the 10 local authorities? And then, providing you are, then B, we can go on to discuss the terms of reference.
I've got the paperwork I was looking for. Sorry about that, folks. We're looking at terms of reference first of all.
Whether they want to be part of it.
They want to be part of it. So that's the bit you first have to vote on or agree to as a scrutiny committee.
Chair? I don't think we can afford to be outside it, so my opinion is we do need to be a part of it.
So you agree? Yeah. Somebody propose, somebody second.
I propose, yes.
Right, so one over there and one over there. Doesn't matter who really. Ron, you suggest, yeah, and somebody over there. Kelly? Agreed. So are you unanimous? Anybody against? No. So everybody voted in favour. Anybody against? Show of hands. Let's just do it that way. Yep. So that's for. Against? Abstain? No, everybody in favour. Thank you. So that's the bit you want.
Okay. So So moving on then to the terms of reference. Terms of reference have been drafted, but they were drafted by the cabinet originally. So
that's the Cardiff City, City Deal cabinet,
yeah.
Not our cabinet.
So anyway, they're set out in Appendix B2. I think the most important section of that relates to the functions to be exercised by the Joint Scrutiny Committee. Obviously, it's up to you, you know, whether you think there's any amendments that need to be fed into this terms of reference. From my point of view, they perhaps look a little bit passive. They don't really feel like scrutiny as we might do it in Torvine. I think, you know, you could really sort of emphasise, you know, that you are there to make recommendations to the executive. You know, you have the power to do that. At the moment, it reads more like, you know, taking information. So obviously, it's up to you if you've got any recommendations you'd want to feed into the process. Like I said, I feel it's not quite hard enough at the moment. But
would you like to briefly go through what we got here? I'll just lead you through. I'm not going to read every single bit of it. I'll just go through section 1 and the general headings. If there's anything you don't like or want to add to it, we sort of suggested that when we looked through this. So, in terms of reference, you've got introduction. You've got section 1 on there, which is Cardiff Capital Region City Deals, a joint committee of 10 authorities. Well, that's obvious enough. The purposes of the terms of reference, the next section down, and it says the joint working agreement means agreement by the various councils. Appointing authorities are, and then section 2, City Deals, appointing authorities and a programme board. Well, that's obvious enough. And it goes down there. Anything anybody's seen in there they don't like to start with, but that's just setting the ground, as it were. Then membership of the Joint Scrutiny Committee, it says 4, the Joint Committee shall consist of 1 non-executive member from each appointing authority. It's advocating 10 members on this committee. If you read a bit further down, it suggests one and possibly a substitute if they can't make it. That suggestion. It's up to you whether you think it ought to be more than that or not. It is a matter for each appointed authority. On section 5 it says, and this is probably where we're getting into detail a bit here, it says it's a matter for each appointing authority from time to time to nominate or terminate the appointment of its nominated members serving on the Joint Scrutiny Committee. Each appointing authority shall be entitled from time to time to appoint a deputy for its member representative to the Joint Scrutiny Committee, but such deputy should only be entitled to speak or vote at meetings of the Joint Scrutiny Committee in the absence of his or her corresponding principal. I don't know what people think about that. It's up to us to set the terms, it says there, and then they make that statement. Norma?
When you have a substitute, there's no continuity. I mean, that person is going into it new. I mean, you can read the minutes, but it's never the same as being in the meetings itself. No. Perhaps it would be wiser to have 2 from each authority, and then it would mean that's only 20 people.
Thank you, Norma. You actually echo what I'm thinking already, because if you have 2 people from each authority, you could get over issues which they tie themselves in knots with further on about gender neutrality and things like that. If you have 2 people, you can do a lot more. Thank you for that. I don't know what other people think, but you immediately put some stuff in there.
Chair, I agree totally. I think it's beneficial for us to have 2 members on the board.
Thank you. Anybody else on this one? So,
Chair, in regarding, on top of what you've just said there, if like those 2 members should be able to vote, if like at the end of the day, in their own right.
So we immediately suggested that we have 2 members. I think it's ridiculous. I don't know whether we can or not. Nigel?
I just think, Chair, you need to, I mean, by all means you can consider this and make recommendations. Yeah. I think as a scrutiny committee you just need to remember you're part of a 10 authority joint committee here, so you can do no more than suggest and recommend to Bridgend, who are coordinating this, and the new scrutiny committee when it meets, decide and form some views. So I think if you're going to make comments and recommendations, you need to make them within that within that context, there's another 9 councils considering this. I would also challenge back a committee of 20 scrutinising starts to feel, very big to me, because if one has 2, everyone's going to have 2. But as long as you make those comments, your comments within the context, that they'll have to be considered by the joint scrutiny when it and Bridgend when it coordinates, So these come subservient to your first recommendation of wanting to be in.
I'm taking on board on what Nigel has said, but regarding what is being scrutinised, if like, I don't think 20 is too big. If like the fact that we're talking about obviously the Cardiff capital and the process and the project and the scale of the project, I don't think that 20 people is too big, and that's my own personal thoughts.
You're right. I think you're probably right there. I think, am I getting the feeling from the meeting that most people are totally in agreement with that?
Just to come in, I mean, at the moment, you're going to be asked that when this is received at council to nominate a member. Now you're saying you want 2 members. Now I think because as Nigel just said, Bridgend administer this, and everyone else is proceeding on the basis of one member. There is going to be an element of complexity here. Whether I think initially the best thing to do would be to
observation on this, can't we?
These need to be fed. These comments need to be fed into the scrutiny committee once it is formed. But at the moment, it needs to be formed on the basis of 1 member. If Torvine and other authorities, once it has formed, feel that 2 members is appropriate, to try and get 2 in now, I think that's going to throw the process totally up in the air, because we'd have to do that, and every other authority would have to do that. Okay. Does that make sense?
Norman, you want to say something, do you?
Yes. You're telling us then all the other authorities have agreed to this?
I'm not telling that because
surely they'll all go through the same process as Torvine and discuss it first before entering into it. I mean, other authorities might have the same way of thinking as Torvine.
We have to start somewhere, though. In order for the committee to develop its own terms of reference, it needs to come together as a committee. Now, the draft terms of reference suggests 1 member for each council, making 10 members. Now, if those 10 members were to get together and decide that actually they prefer to have 2 members, then I think that would be the forum then to discuss expanding the committee.
Did you want to say something?
Yeah, can I just clarify? Obviously, Bridgend are leading this, so they have sent out this report to each of the participating authorities. So because of the legislation, the 2011 measure, any joint committee that's established has to go through the relevant overview and scrutiny committees of each partner authority. So what you're being asked to, you've already agreed that you want to be part of that. So these draft terms of reference are for comment, but as Tom says, they are for comment for the new committee to agree. So what they're asking for is when we went to an officer meeting in Bridgend, what they were saying is actually a committee of 10, the committee needs to be nimble enough to meet, because obviously if you increase the size of the committee, you're increasing the quorum. There's a danger then that you might not be quorate because the meeting's going to be held in Bridgend. There's a cost associated with the members travelling, so you just need to be aware of that. But what they also said, that all members that are nominated, whether they be the member of the scrutiny committee or the deputy, will receive the same level of training. So they're going to do some training in September once the nominations are received and they know how many participating authorities are part of the arrangement. And there is no reason why that deputy can't sit and observe the meetings. But despite, and I take on Councillor Kemp's point that it is a big project, but it's not really the size of the project that dictates the size of the committee. It's making sure that each partner agency
or partner local authority is represented and that the committee is agile enough to actually function. So it's been recommended based on lots of research. I mean, most committees are 10 members. This one is slightly different because we look at the cross-cutting issues, but you are looking at a specific project, and each of those reports that come through, whether there's 2 of you or 1 of you, you will be able to scrutinise them effectively. So there is a lot of support around for deputies that might have to step in at any time. And of course the reports will come through and you will be supported by your scrutiny team here to attend those meetings. So I don't think you need to get hung up particularly on the membership. I think what we need to do, every local authority has to agree before summer recess that you want to be part of it. And we need to get that through council, because you can only recommend to council that you want to be part of it. We need to nominate at council who is going to be our representative and deputy. And then I think you can have conversations as to how you make sure that that deputy is sufficiently well briefed to attend. Hopefully, that deputy won't have to attend on very rare occasions. We don't know the meeting schedules yet. None of that has been set up. So I don't think you need to get too hung up on the membership. We need to just get it through, and then we can have those conversations.
This was there first.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, my feeling is I would still like to recommend to the future committee that they consider having the 20 members. I don't think it's an issue for us to do that because we have to nominate somebody and a deputy, so we'll be nominating 2 people anyway. I don't see any conflict with that. I just want to say, yeah, so even though I take on board what you're saying, I don't see any conflict with us continuing to recommend the same thing for that future committee then to consider when they first meet.
Mr. Kemp?
Yeah, again, I'm taking on board what Lynn has said, but I think with the project and the scale of this project, I personally would not like just one person to represent us on regarding this particular project. I think it warrants 2 people, and in regarding the training and the expenses, in regarding the cost, comparing the cost of the whole of this project, it's negligible at the end of the day. What I'm looking at is basically who is going to be representing us, and whether or not that person is going to be strong enough to represent this particular borough. And I would say if we've got 2 people there, knowing that if it was only the one person, who goes sick or whatever, there's got to be, as Norma said, a certain amount of continuity. And if there's 2 people there, then there would be that continuity there. So again, I would echo the comments of the other councillors by saying he needs 20 people over the 10 authorities.
If you want to come in quickly, and then you can answer everybody.
My point is the 2 members do work, but myself and Alan sit on the fire authority with the 10 local authorities, and if either of us can't make the meeting, one of us does attend. So the 2-member system does work with the 10 authorities.
Come back on that then. And Nigel.
I think as long as members of this scrutiny committee realise that when it's established, they're taking those comments and the comments of this scrutiny into the wider scrutiny for the wider scrutiny to consider, that's fine. It was just the earlier narrative was almost leading me to think, well, if you say 2, it's going to be 2. It might not be, because the other 9 may say we just want 1. So as long as you make your comments within that context, I think it's absolutely fine.
I think members have got that already. Thank you, Nigel. Didn't you want to come back on anything?
Thank you.
Right. So, we've got a few more. Stuart and then Pete.
Yeah, I just wondered if, and Lynn mentioned that the host authority would be having the meetings there. Perhaps at a future time and discussion with the scrutiny committee, perhaps the meetings could go around the respective boroughs.
that, if you look in the proposal, is there, by the way, Stuart. Peter?
Just a very brief point. I'm always wary of committees when there's an even number. The point 9 on the report says the procedure rules will be those of the host authority for its scrutiny committees. I assume that will mean that there will be a chair's casting vote if there was ever a split. I mean, it's just an observation. Once we've sorted this out, we need to make sure.
Ron?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, everybody's got their own opinion. But as Steve just said, with the other 10 authorities and the police authority, fire, whatever, I mean, this is only a recommendation from us. I mean, if it went to the other 9 authorities, they might all be thinking the same thing, and that would get passed. But as Nigel said, 9 of them might say, well, we don't want to accept that. So I think we just put the recommendation, well, what we think, for 2, and let's get on with it, because, I mean, we talk about it all day. But if the 9 don't want it, we won't get it. But if the 9 do, as I say, until we get there and find out, we don't know, do we?
We've had a very useful discussion on this. We've had some very useful advice from our officers, but I think I'm getting a general view from members. Do we want to vote on it, or do we just want to go? The general view seems to be, someone wants to put a proposal up, is that that we have 2 people recommended, and that this can fit within the view as the recommendation, or we go to 2 people from this council. Everybody agree with that? A proposal is what we need.
Yeah, I propose then that Torvine go ahead and propose that 2 people represent each authority on this board.
Right, everybody, so hands up, a show of hands. Yeah. Abstain? Well, that's a good abstination. But we had a few abstaining. Have you got that up there? So the general consensus is, okay, so the general view is that really we should have 2 people, and that obviously would lead to 20. But how would you get your chairman's, presumably if there was a chairman elected, they would have casting vote, wouldn't they? Because you did make that suggestion.
I'm assuming that would be a normal practice when there's an even split.
I also
that'll just need to be clarified once the committee meets for the first time.
But let's put it as a strongly held recommendation from this. It's strongly held recommendation from this committee.
Just an observation that needed to be checked, Chair.
In regarding number 9, if there's been organisations where if there's been an equal vote, then whatever is being discussed falls, if you like, and there's no casting vote as such because it's equal. I take on board, if you like, that number 9 needs to be looked at, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the lead authority should have the casting vote, especially with a large project like this. I wouldn't like it.
All I was suggesting is that we seek clarification on that issue. I'm not suggesting it should have a casting vote. I'm just wondering what the procedures are of the host authority, because that's what the terms of reference state.
So the interesting point. You're coming in now.
I think. Oh, sorry. So the joint committee will be run in the same way as Bridgend runs their overview and scrutiny function. So it may be slightly different to what you're used to, but as they bring you all together, they will take you through that training, as I said, and then their procedures will be set out in their constitution. So it will be run along the, Bridgend is the support function, that's been agreed. So whatever is set out in their constitution you will follow.
I was asking for was clarification that we'll find out in due course.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting parallel that Stephen brought up about the fire authority. Members in this council are used to other ways of doing things. So that was an interesting parallel about the double and I think we're not the only one. The other, if we go down this list, codes of contact, declarations of interest, contact, confidential, we're all used to this. At any rate, there's nothing new, is it? And openness and transparency is something I think most of us or other bodies are used to. So it's then functions of joint scrutiny. And the other thing I've not seen in here, I don't know what members, that principles of scrutiny, the critical friend routine, it's the critical and the friend. Lynn's hammered this into me over the years personally. And it's, somebody said about being on the city deal, and Tom said this about the city deal isn't about a scrutiny committee being there and sitting there and hearing the information, it's actually having the information. So how that scrutiny committee takes that information and works with it at this level, because you said, didn't you, Robert, about how you deal with something that's a very, very big project, billions of pounds. It's just the same as dealing with small something, it's just noughts on the end of it. Somebody's nodding their head here, but at the end of the day, that does frighten people, and I think you need to be able to handle stuff at this level. It's not noughts on the end, that's really the big difference, but it's still a friend and a critical friend. It's down to that again, and how you report back to your various councils. But you did say something to me that I hadn't realised, that we still use our scrutiny officers as well as their scrutiny setup. So it's a double scrutiny setup, is it? I hadn't realised that.
Not for the meetings as such. The support will come from Bridgend, but if our nominated member needs additional support, then we will be there to do that.
Any more comments of members? Okay.
Just wondered, is there a mechanism where the person who's going to go on this committee automatically feeds back to council? Is that through scrutiny, or will there be another way of? It's such a huge commitment for us. This is, and we're only one small bit, and we need to know what's going on because we have a lot of poverty down here, don't we? And other authorities have got, a better place than us, so we need a feedback to everybody. I would have thought.
You're totally right, because one of the things I feel as a scrutiny chair, and I think other scrutiny chairs that sat in here might echo this, and people that have done the job, is it's the research function as well, and feeding back into council is a two-way process. Because we go out sometimes and say, I'm not happy with reports, and not happy. The people that sit on that committee are going to have some, not just sitting there, take what comes at them and say, is this right, is this correct? It's a little bit more than just sat there. I don't know what other people that sat in that position, and I can sit on what's a pretty high power, am I looking at the right stuff? And that to my mind is important, how much stuff you're getting back, and whether you do it or the officers that do it, your scrutiny function is really important.
Just to say, in the same way as all our scrutiny committees are public, this will be a public meeting. I believe, and I'll have to check, it will be webcast as well. So I think there'll be a two-way communication. The person or persons who sit on the committee will need to feed back to members, but if you're cited on papers and you see the meeting and you feel like they're missing a trick, then you'll need to speak to them and ensure that they're doing what they're meant to be doing.
Yeah, that's reassuring, and we do need a way to feed back to them and to have consensus about what they put to the committee in this case. So important, isn't it?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Tom's explained it. I'm going to bring up the very same point. As it says in the report, it's open to the public. It's webcasted. You can get the information from various sources, and we have regular updates at council as well off the leader. So I think we're well covered there from our angle.
More on this? Okay. So going over to the other page, it's got provisional. What's that mean?
Provisos.
Provisos, yeah. And then duration. So, anybody got any other strong observations on this before we leave it? Okay. So where do we go next with this?
I know, just before we do move on, like I said in my introduction, I did feel like the functions to be exercised by the Joint Scrutiny Committee were perhaps quite passive at the moment, but that, you know, if you haven't got any comments on them, then that's fine. I mean, these can be debated once the committee starts to discuss their own terms of reference.
Chair, any idea of the timescale of that happening?
The intention is to, let's bring it back a bit. Now you've agreed that you want to be part of this committee, we'll take a paper to the next council. Council will hopefully endorse and nominate a person to sit on the committee. It's the intention, Bridgen's intention, to pull together members from the 10 representatives in September. That would be initially for training to start with, and then they would have their first meeting from there to start to discuss their terms of reference and work programme. Initially, they are looking at doing 2 meetings in the first year. Whether that grows then is open to discussion by the Scrutiny Committee.
Thank you, Tom.
Right. Anything else before we close this down? You're looking a bit stunned now.
So the only recommendation I'm getting is around the 2 members.
Yeah.
But just to be absolutely 100% clear, when this goes to council in June, you will be nominating 1 member. But then that 2-member discussion is for another day. Okay?
Yeah.
Absolutely, sorry.
Yeah. The date of the next meeting will be sometime in July.
Discuss the annual performance report.
And it will, it will be discussing the annual performance review. It's sometime around about the 8th, what date?
In the middle of July.
Middle of July. And that's it, folks. Thank you very much for your forbearance, and may go.